Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name has been Mr. DB333, and welcome back to the new campaign trail. Or should I say the new American patriotism. Last time we were here together, we hopped into the year of 1956 with the campaign of one very, very troubled, very, very morally dubious Senator, Mr. Joseph McCarthy. And after a very dubiously ran campaign, we managed to go ahead and defeat the Speaker of the House, Mr. Was it McCormick? John McCormick, I believe. And we went ahead and got our way into the White House alongside the man, the myth, the legend, Tricky Dick Nixon, after a couple of reshufflings here and there. Now, I was debating which mod I was going to play next for the recording session, but I realized and I decided I was going to settle on a mod that I've been playing quite a fair bit in my off time that I do very much enjoy. And I just have not had the time to play it much lately, or, play on the channel. Until now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to Icarus. I'm already stumbling. This is a great start to the video. The post-9/11 era saw a desperate Democratic Party cowardly pivot towards the center and bow to the Bush administration's whims. Harbingers of war, hell-bent on abusing the mandate bestowed by tragedy, created a crowded but divided opposition. Looking outward for an answer of any kind, the Democrats poached General Wesley K. Clark, who quickly rose to the challenge, first beating out the weak fringe candidates and then, against all the odds, beating President George W. Bush. With victory secured, he must take on new conquests, either mapping his way through the entrenched party lines in Congress or skipping the swamps to repair the alliances that Bush torched. However, as the economy begins to show signs of war, it's unknown whether he'll be able to fly towards an easy victory. Much credit to all the devs who created this, literally Nelson Rockefeller, the main developer, as well as a couple of other people, OEO, Space Nerd, I'm not going to try to pronounce that right now, Shockonomics, and Dyson. Very, very good mod. Excellent. The soundtrack is banger, by the way. I got to give you guys that. Best campaign trail mod soundtrack, in my opinion. Anyway, let's look at the man himself, Wesley K. Clark. Democrats have locked themselves in with General Clark, and their choice will either prove to be the greatest miscalculation since Carter, or a stroke of blind and undeserved luck. So what is it that Wesley Clark does that make the Democrats tick? Endorsed by the likes of George McGovern, Max Baucus, Michael Moore, and Madonna, you'd assume he's clothed in riches. Well, the goal these Democrats saw was an impeccable resume that proved capable of beating Bush. The kicker is how badly Democrats misunderstood the man. He is his own action figure, believing himself to be above the fray of party and congressional politics. He's the 12 Knights of the Round Table, or the Three Wise Men, all wrapped in one dominating personality, blessed with Athena like wisdom and knowledge. No matter who is locked in the room with him, he's the smartest man. His word is final, and he will not tolerate insubordination within his ranks. Well, there we go. Meanwhile, for our running mate, we have Miss Mary Landrieu. Mrs. Mary? I'm not sure if she's married or not. I know she is married, though. From the state of Louisiana. Washington had Hamilton, Kaiser had Antony, and Clark has Landrieu, a loyal right hand for every great leader. Initially, she came forward to satisfy the establishment in the Blue Dog Caucus, who stood behind the general in his journey to claim the Democratic nomination. With the ticket carved in stone, the general has sky-high goals for his new lieutenant. From his view, Destiny's granted him his strongest soldier, a superwoman who will jump when he says jump and get in line when he says to do so. However, she's no doormat, especially when it comes to wanting to protect her friends, including Senator Joe Loserman and other feckless party traitors. If push comes to shove, they could draw swords upon each other, but she is a loyal party gal willing to travel to the front line of his legislative conquests. Well, that's what we need. We have a little status report right here. Let's take a look at the polls currently. So the main issues are ideology, national security, the Iraq War, gay marriage, and the Bush tax cuts. We have 5 little trackers we have to keep an eye on. Victories. We currently lament conquests. Congress smells weakness and is unwilling to yield an inch. Neoliberalism. Feel left out. NATO leverage. They're reluctant to work with us. And Russian hostility. Calm but suspicious of us. So we have that. That's our status report. We also have this whole fucking thing. We have multiple candidates who we could be running against. John McCain, Mitt Romney, Jeb Bush, Rudy Giuliani, Ron Paul, Mike Huckabee, and the RNC itself. These just represent the different candidates who you can get potentially. I know Brownback and Cheney are 2 other ones. I forget if anyone's off the top of my head. So the Speaker of the House is Dennis Hastert. Hopefully he won't be like that for much longer. We also have our conquests, which we don't have yet. Foreign leaders. We have Tony Blair in the UK. And stuck in the shadow of his prime. President Jacques Chirac of France. We have President Nihil, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, I'm about to butcher this. Ahmet Necdet Sezer of Turkey. And Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder of Deutschland. So we have some hesitant merchants and unwilling vassals that we have to whip into line. And we also have the battle for Olympus. This is the midterms. We have a ton of seats up for grabs, both on the GOP side and the Democrat side, that we got to figure out who... we're going to see how things play out. You know, some of these are more or less locked in no matter what. I believe West Virginia, Mass, most of these are fine, but going in order of challengers, we have Ned Lamont in Connecticut, who we have to support, Bob Casey Jr. in Pennsylvania, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, Sheldon Whitehouse in Rhode Island over here. Man, his name's Whitehouse. We gotta help him out. We have Gene Carnahan in Missouri, John Tester in Montana, Jim Webb in Virginia, Harold Ford Jr. in Tennessee, Jim Peterson in Arizona, Jack Carter in Nevada, Eric Fleming in Mississippi, and Barbara Ann Radnofsky in Texas. Ignore these 4 people. They're not going to go anywhere. If we do everything correctly, or maximize the midterms, I believe the maximum we can get is up to the Tennessee race. We also have to defend our incumbents, Ted Kennedy and Robert Byrd, as well as Hillary Clinton and Dianne Feinstein are more or less fortified, as well as Akaka in Hawaii, Bingham in whatever state he's in, Sarbond in Maryland. See, Cole is Wisconsin. Carper is Delaware. But we could potentially lose Michigan, Washington, Minnesota, Jersey, Florida, Nebraska, and North Dakota. So we're going to have to fortify ourselves the best we can for these midterms. Even try to see if we can't gain a couple seats. But we will get there when we get there, won't we? But we're going to need a game plan, because politics, just like war, is hard work for incremental gains. First, you slayed Senator Kerry's campaign in Iowa and New Hampshire. Then, down the stretch, you outlasted Dean and Edwards in the swamps of Super Tuesday. Now, at last, the Democratic nomination is yours. But the job isn't finished yet. With the war in Iraq raging and the insidious Bush still occupying the nation's highest office. As the 2004 Democratic National Convention commences, you must make a promise to your most die-hard supporters, a promise with which you will march to the great gates of Olympus, a promise that you have no choice but to fulfill. What will be, Clark? No child left behind in its current status, fail not children. I promise to reform and fix our broken education system, to craft a new curriculum focused on building American leaders after I take down the man who broke it. The crowd erupts in cheers, propelling you into the race with righteous fury. As Bush collapses under the weight of his lies and failures, you slay the dragon, cross the magical 270 vote threshold. Hopefully you can keep your promise. Well, let's hope, huh? So, yeah, not much change in the map there. Well, no amount of fear-mongering or partisan chicanery could save Bush, and you take the throne as a new emperor presiding over the darkest deeds of Olympus. Elsewhere, Democrats have reclaimed the Senate by a hair and made gains in the House, even as they fall short of majority. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as most Republicans that you attempted to recruit to your causes, as unity picks have either ignored your calls or outright declined you. You've settled on some basics. Kerry is state, Levin at defense, and Summers at treasury, headlining a smattering of less high-profile picks closely vetted for loyalty. Well, will you place your focus on the first 100 days? Well, it's time to end the American monopoly in Iraq. We must call for a summit with our allies from the U.S. to Japan to create a new unifying coalition to show that we are no longer going at this alone, while also keeping Iraqis safe from terror and bloodshed. Something makes for good press, as most believe you'd be a credible military leader. However, they talks lead to no additional country raising its hand to help. Still, you build goodwill among all parties, as Prime Minister Blair in particular hails them as great successes, even if it's just a clear attempt to hold his own coalition together. Well, we got a victory, as well as a little NATO leverage. So what I'm going to try to do, I've played this particular path that I'm going to go down a fair bit. I'm going to try to maximize my strategy, which means I'm going to put a bunch of visits into Indiana, and once the candidacy for the GOP is announced, split my visits between Texas and Oklahoma. Because it's pretty easy to win the West Coast, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. Arizona can be kind of iffy, but if you do everything right, you should be fine. It's pretty easy to win all the states east of the Mississippi outside of Indiana, so I'm going to dump some visits into it. Oklahoma and Texas are flippable, and if you do things right, Montana will flip no issue. And depending how lucky your RNG is, you can get North and South Dakota. This all depends on good RNG in general. But that's what my strategy is going to be. So we're going to start off in Indiana. Republicans, specifically the overzealous religious types, are climbing up from the underworld. Is that going to be Fox News? The Republican conference. There we go. In hopes of performing a resurrection by intervening in the public spectacle that is the Terry Schiavo case. Her vegetative body has become a flashpoint in the media as many disability rights activists and right-to-die activists clash with each other. Now Republicans are looking to intervene by any means necessary to keep the poor woman's tube in. How will you lead your party in response to the enemy's movement west? Well, Republicans are making something that should be low stakes into a profound political issue, and I want to know why. We have some senators close to this resolution like Harkin and Conrad. Find out what they know. Soon the Schiavo memo was accidentally leaked to Tom Harkin, which describes the case as a great political cause and a tough issue for Democrats. The public opposition to their blatant gamesmanship couldn't get any louder, and Republicans are paying for it dearly. Are we doing a little better? After a short trip through states ripped to shreds by Hurricane Katrina, you've returned home to Olympus, where good news awaits you. You're informed that Republican House Majority Leader Tom DeLay has been indicted for blatant criminal behavior, forcing him to resign. With his resignation, the people's trust in the Republican Congress has evaporated, leading to Minority Leader Pelosi meeting with you to discuss how we can take advantage of the situation. What will we do, Mr. President? Well, No Child Left Behind is deeply flawed and underfunded piece of legislation, because these career politicians don't understand that our education system is the first front line in keeping us ahead of authoritarian countries like China and Russia. To retake the lead, we need to create a new standard for educators and axe this draconian punishment system we've created for underperforming schools. While conservatives had issues with No Child Left Behind, their concerns intensify as you bring a vast overhaul of the program to the table. You cut standard testing in favor of equality in school funding, bringing some much-needed fairness to the system. They shout and heckle, but you remain determined and blitzkrieg through the opposition before they get a chance to consolidate their defenses. There we go. We'll visit Indiana in the meanwhile. Olympus is calling your name, President Clark. Sections of the Patriot Act, which have kept its stern eye overseeing all souls underneath, are finally due to expire this year. Finally, the flagrant government overreach is coming to a long overdue end. Or is it? The base is cheering for a win, but congressional Democrats still await your guidance, as entrenched establishment Democrats line up at your door begging for you to extend most of these sections, like sneak and peek warrants, searches of library and business records, and roving wiretaps. Even Vice President Landrieu, sitting in here his throne, echoes their calls. Will you make good on your promises and end this needless violation of people's privacy, or will you let Olympus overtake you? We're going through with a full sunshine review of the Patriot Act. We've already seen folks like John Ashcroft abuse its power in cases unrelated to terrorism, and such abuses simply won't do. We are going through each provision of the Act, and if they aren't directly helping curb terrorism, they will be sunset. You have pushed forward, despite the best efforts of Senators Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, to hold you back. The paranoid critics called the Tuesday Night Massacres section after section of the damn law is cut to pieces. You personally feel no remorse, confidently basking in the base's cheers. Well, there we go. It's all coming along, I think. Do you have any status for our administration? We have one conquest. The Education Advancement and Opportunities Act, enacted by the 109th Congress and sponsored by Lynn Woosley, an overall No Child Left Behind Act, including additional funding and replacement of standardized testing provisions with new teacher training guideline provisions. There we go. As predicted, Republicans have seized the 06 midterms as an opportunity to strike back against the very core of your prestige. Congress is adjourned with members running home to safeguard their seats. The window for domestic victories is closed. Now you must prove your administration's resolve by achieving progress on the global stage, whether in the Middle East or Europe. Republicans doubt your leadership. How will you prove them wrong? Well, de-Baathification as a policy has been another disaster, only serving to become a vortex of sooner resentment and allow a power vacuum to shake the core of Iraq. We must reverse this policy immediately and lead Iraq with caution, not panic. Shia elites grumble from their offices, but under your command, you reverse one of Paul Bremer's greatest festering disasters. The Sunni, while slightly jaded from the prior administration, begin to trickle back into the system. The cowling of the Bush administration officials grow with the fear that the Ba'ath Party could have a day in the new Iraq, but you move forward, offering the world America's blank slate. Kind of hampering our numbers a little bit in Indiana, but we'll do our best to fix that. Is this true? Seems so, Mr. President, replies Josh Gottheimer, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. He can't muster anything except a simple disgusting. Congressman Mark Foley resigned after a scandal regarding him soliciting minors for sex through instant messages. Now ABC's just published follow-up story. Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, under investigation for alleged sexual abuse of high school boys during his time as a coach. It's all crashing down. Hastert's long and corrupt rule over the House of Reps is coming to its bloody conclusion, as Democrats nationwide prepare to sink their teeth into their opponents. You wonder if this is a sign of what's to come. Victorious conquests await. What do you think, Clark? Who do you have running against Hastert? Any chance he's one of Karl Rove's clients? Hastert attempts to outrun the scandal, but alas, Republicans and Democrats catch the pedophile's ass and rip him to shreds. He's ousted from the speakership, and Republicans nationwide polling plummets. It's looking bad for them, and good for you. And there we are, Conquistador. Check out the battle for Olympus. Look at that. We've retained all of our seats. And we have not fully, but we have conquered. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have taken 8 seats in the Senate in a midterm year where our party's in power. Doesn't it feel glorious? Clever girl. You pulled off the impossible. I don't know how you've done it, but you've expanded your mandate further than anyone could imagine. The Democrats hold a coronation for the first ever woman Speaker of the House, and the Senate majority has expanded. Elena Kagan's nomination for Chief Justice flying through the world is yours. The stars are not yet within your reach, and you feel it's time to embark on what we've described as your faith-based initiative. Lightspeed capabilities have escaped much of humanity's comprehension, but not yours. It's an issue that not many in your party care to comment on, but to you, it's America's ticket to conquering outer space. Past leadership may have been willing to let NASA rot away, but you are not. How will you pass the NASA Research and Investment Act? Well, faith should not be a driving force of policy, but my faith is based on data and facts. Light speed is within humanity's reach. We need to push ourselves to grab a hold of the stream. Congress must pass my bill to secure the funding we need to conquer the stars. Pelosi grits her teeth and mutters about it being a bad idea, but after all you've done to secure the Democratic Party's power, she relents and signs off on a law giving you the shiny new toy you've always wanted. Please, you give a demonstration to the press of what the future of science will look like by waving a model spaceship around the Oval Office. Well, there we go. Let's visit Indiana in the meanwhile. Well, in the halls of Olympus, the vague sentiments of dissatisfaction have been quietly haunted by your presidency return. Back again, it's Iraq. The war brought by the harbingers of doom and justified by the trusted wisdom of Powell. Last year's Congressional Hamilton Commission has prepared a frightening report of a deteriorating grave situation in Iraq. The message is clear. A change of strategy is required. Many within your circle suggest a troop surge, even as outside, you hear cries for peace from the movement that propelled you here. How will you atone for the sins of your predecessors? The Bush administration never sent in enough troops. We had 40,000 troops in Kosovo for a population of 2 million, and we need 540,000 troops to support 27 million Iraqis. It's basic math and an easy decision. The clean and hold strategy doesn't work, and there's no benefit to be had from throwing more of our citizens into the grinder. We had to leave in Iraq by 2009, and that's the way it's going to be. Republicans across the country decry the decision, but the American people are happy at large. Closer to home, the anti-war elements of the party have been happily put to bed. Though General Petraeus and many establishment Democrats warn that you're making a mistake, you swat them away and begin to fully embrace your most enthusiastic supporters. Well, there we go. It's not doing us well in the states we want to flip, but we'll see if we can't flip things around. I have a new conquest as well, the NASA's Research and Investment Act, sponsored by Bill Nelson, the senator from Florida, signed into law to increase NASA's space program funding and divert resources to fund research into lightspeed technology. Described by the president's only faith-based initiative, he confidently states that the U.S. would craft technology necessary to travel at light speed. There we go. Oh, it's gonna... Ooh, it hit the corner. Hell yeah. Your refusal to call for a troop surge in Iraq is morally and possibly politically commendable. However, the Iraqi parliament still requests a formal withdrawal timeline. At the same time, British Prime Minister Blair, along with many other coalition governments, has announced plans to begin withdrawing troops. You feel proud as you plan just how to turn the page on this long national mistake. How will the country leave Iraq? President Clark. Check our stats. Oh my god, we've already conquered Olympus. Look at that. We have 3 conquests. Congress still thinks they can stand in our way. And is still reluctant to work with us. Well, I want to take this moment to thank all the coalition partners who have stood up for Iraqi freedom. Our mission is complete, and we can say that Iraq is safe. Now we can move on from this conflict with pride that we've secured democracy for the Iraqi people. The call for unity is desperately needed as more and more coalition partners fully pull back from Iraq, leaving it solely in the hands of Iraqis. The Republican Party is gunning to make you pay for this, but for now you've made the people at home and abroad happy. There we go. They respect us now for exercising leadership. Indiana, here we come. The midterm performance expectedly sent the party's morale soaring, and now, with your nomination of Arizona Governor Janet Napolitano up to the Supreme Court, you feel confident and ready to push Congress for more. Something to boost your re-election prospects to head what will certainly be a vengeful GOP primary season. Vice President Landrieu has promised to fight tooth and nail for whatever he proposes in the Senate. What will it be, Wes? Well, just as our soldiers can't do their jobs without adequate health care, our families shouldn't be expected to do their best jobs without it either. The first step is stopping insurance companies that disqualify those with pre-existing conditions and raising the age at which children can claim their parents' health insurance. Accomplishing more than either Clinton or Johnson could ever dream of, you've delivered a public option to America, effectively combating the cretins running the insurance market. After signing into law, you ask Rahm Emanuel if Congress would be willing to erect a statue in your honor. He gives you a horrified look before you tell him you're joking. These days, you can no longer tell. Well, we did it. The Public Health Protections and Defense Act, sponsored by Charles Wrangler from New York, provides both a individual and public option mandate, amending the Public Health Service Act of 1944, and inserted new provisions on affordable care into Title 42 of the U.S. Code, massively overhauling individual insurance markets and introducing a state-funded health insurance agency that will compete with other private health insurance agencies across America. All very ambitious pieces of legislation. In the meanwhile, we have Tony Blair, who's a loyal little subordinate now. We have Ségolène Royal of France as president. Wicked woman, her. Abdullah Gül of Turkey. And now Angela Merkel in Germany. We made Blair our bitch. That's what matters at the end of the day. Don't need to look at the battle for Olympus anymore. Love is in the air as the mortal realm eagerly cheers the victory of Nicolas Sarkozy as France's next president. Sure, buddy. The balance of power is shifted back towards the West, with Sarkozy promising to work with Britain and America. It couldn't come at a more perfect time, as CIA intelligence findings indicate that a Taliban resurgence is just around the corner in Afghanistan. At home, it's little better, as the economy looks to be going belly up after 2 subprime hedge funds owned by Bear Stearns lost nearly all of their value amid a rapid decline in the market. You can't deal with that for now, though. You need to stabilize the situation abroad. President Sarkozy's friendship is invaluable. His words to the British Parliament were nothing short of hot woman. I'll happily accept his offer to send additional troops to Afghanistan so we can close in on the remnants of the Taliban together. Leaders of France's opposition Socialist Party decry Sarkozy's betrayal of French values, but he blissfully ignores them. After negotiations, he agrees to double French involvement, sending in an additional 1,500 troops as a sign of goodwill. Our support has somehow plummeted after we got out of Iraq and passed healthcare at least in Indiana. Well, they'll learn to love me in time. President Clark, the rumors circling the media were right. You spent too long looking abroad, and now Bear Stearns has collapsed even after a bailout from the New York Federal Reserve. Now the gates of Tartarus have opened, spelling the start of unprecedented U.S. housing market price crashes as thousands of homes are foreclosed. Families are in hysterics while banks knock down their doors and leave them with nothing. Every institution is catching blame, conspiracies are running rampant, and one question is on everyone's lips. What the hell will he do about this? Crass, speaking to these congressional freaks is worse than facing a military tribunal. They want me to act calm? What the hell is calming about any of this? No, we need a copper bomb that's crass with stimulus and temporarily hot foreclosures. Pelosi gulps at the tall task you lay on her desk, but she doesn't second guess you, finding the grit to push this thing through. You get calls asking how you plan to get Republicans on board with this. You respond, what do we need from Republicans? We have a majority. They argue, but they don't dare to sink you now. Well, there we go. When her campaign was started in 2003, a wave of unity swept the nation, energizing the people to fight for a common dream. Just as it was then, the podium is now yours. To prove you can turn the American dream into a tangible reality. That dream, however, is under attack. After government bailouts and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's takeover, public protests have erupted. However, you command the support of a powerful chimera satisfied with Iraq withdrawal date. What will we say to inspire the crowd and save the dream? The Democratic Party has always been the party that gets things done. From Roosevelt to Kennedy to today, we stand in the face of crisis, and we have accomplished record to pack us as we move forward. I vow to confront the recession and deliver a second term defined by a new American patriotism. That's the name. The doubters said it couldn't be done. Some generals believe he can get his party marching orders to get legislation through. Contrary to assumptions, he rolled through Congress, bypassing normal legislative games in favor of loyalty and willpower. Now the crowd is thankful and excited for more. And this is going to be our last visit in Indiana, because here he comes. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. It seems that ejection from Golden Gates of the Republican Party isn't a killing blow nowadays. As the scandalous and hideous Rudy Giuliani takes the stage. Many thought his political career had been left for dead, but he's been carried back on mules, with Representative Mike Pence as the strongest mule at his side. Now the man clothed in the ongoing affairs takes focus on national security, as America's mayor regales all of his tales of action in the aftermath of 9/11, calling for the return of actually fighting terrorists, both at home and abroad. How will you take on this creepy old Italian man, Mr. President? Well, it's disgusting. The same man who used every loophole, including a deferment letter from a buddy judge of his to avoid service in Vietnam, has the gall to attack my patriotism. I took the full force of an AK-47 for this country. The most Rudy has suffered is waiting for a near exam. In his own words, it was a minor hearing problem. It's total nonsense, and this early in the game, he's already beginning to crumble. The tax right itself, draft dodging, and Judge McMahon's deferment. When you contrast it with your service, the blemish is all too noticeable. Let's see what's going on in our administration. Well, here he is, the hero. Heroes are commonly found in fairy tales or comic books, but in the modern day, you need not look further than America's mayor. Rudy Giuliani is a torchbearer of the Bush administration, and his campaign for president has already begun. If you rebuke the legacy set by your predecessor, he'll stand on the gates ready to avenge it. Well, in a classic Russian ploy to bring on Gigantomachy, I don't know. Putin is attempting to push around NATO with Georgia, a tiny country on the border of his regime. Secretary Kerry has visited a young nation, hoping to secure its independence, relaying your message that Georgia should decide its own path. Now the Georgians are looking to join NATO, making relations with Russia turbulent as Volodya threatens serious action. How will he oversee the conflict west? Well, NATO needs to convene and formulate a plan to deal with Georgia. I'm not willing to leave them out to dry. So my friends abroad had better get behind me to show that we will respond with whatever means necessary to stop Russian aggression. Some NATO members, like Britain, uphold their fighting stance against Russia, although they are just as uneasy as the rest. Germany's Merkel is reluctant to commit much of this conflict, but she agrees to keep a ready-to-act appearance. Alright, not worried about. Maybe a visit to North Dakota. Let's focus on Texas. Rudy Giuliani is a municipal superhero without a cape, a media avenger who embodies the will to vanquish terrorism. Not a second goes by without him telling a brave story of that fateful day. Stories make him the talk of a town, the #1 war on terror candidate. Even many are sick of hearing it. Bin Laden's still not within America's grasp. He's the ammo to pummel you. Clark is too soft on terror. Clark is letting Bin Laden go free. He's relentless, but you know how to wipe the smile off his face, don't you, Wes? The blame on not catching Osama bin Laden falls solely on Bush, who wasted our resources chasing ghosts and whispers in Iraq. Under my administration, we focused all our resources on catching him over, starting more wars. We say that we're not going to try to capture him. But Russia's a little hostile. Giuliani's the first to come to the defense of Bush and at beck and call. However, he finds himself struggling to justify it without sounding foolish. The cues he gave the Bush administration are not something that the public is willing to reciprocate. Well, well, this is it. You're facing a veritable typhoon, stronger than Katrina ever dreamed of being, and it's ready to destroy you. Lehman Brothers is heading towards a total collapse, and their upcoming bankruptcy will only serve to spill oil on the flames of the economic crisis. The bankers are bouncing around like they're in a pinball machine, desperate to come to some sort of deal to avoid bankruptcy. Most of Congress and the public are steadfastly against bailing them out, and the Fed is unwilling to step in on Lehman Brothers' behalfs. But Spinks bestows upon you riddle guidance. What will you do, Wes? For many doors, although they seem bleak, branching web for those who seek. Though journeys vary, twists may trace. Most find me in the same old place. Alright, so I believe this is the point where we start making up some serious game in the polls. Well, America's greatest intellectuals have proven themselves useless even as the poorest classes rise in rebellion. However, I do not subscribe to the beliefs of these let-it-die activists. Congress must approve a bill to allow us to save Lehman Brothers. You hold an immense amount of political capital, although many in Congress heckle your efforts, with Senator Bernie Sanders calling the deal socialism for the rich. They realize that it's the only way to save the markets. The public backlash is immense, but you're no stranger to such luxuries of power. Not as bad as it seems like it is. Meanwhile, we are going to hop in to Oklahoma. By the way, if you notice, we have no photo man here. Tom Tancredo taking a bunch of support out of the South. This is going to be the main reason we're going to be able to sweep the Deep South without much worries. That's why we're going to focus our investments in Oklahoma and Texas for the most part. We'll maybe keep an eye on the Dakotas. But we'll do Oklahoma for now. Despite all the howling and barking of Republicans, who act as if they've known all along, all there is to the past, present, and future, the list of acts who refuse to divulge further details have been proven wrong. Declared that over 10 U.S. combat brigades have returned home safe, leaving behind a quiet situation in Iraq. If we avoid what many believe would cause a civil war in the region, with Kerry touting success in interviews, you almost look vindicated. How will we capitalize on success? Well, it's only fair that to protect the people, our people, since the mandate is ours to barter with, I want these negotiations to provide for a U.S. training force, in exchange for these troops being granted immunity if something comes awry. Prime Minister al-Maliki does all he can to unite Parliament against the motion, but his waning political capital falls in the face of pressure from Washington. The deal is sweetened for American interests, allowing for war crimes committed by U.S. troops to be punished with a slap on the wrist. Well, that's not very nice, Clark. Italy. But I think that's the best we can go with. Giuliani and many of his neoconservative analysts who held him up like a puppet are lost for words. Their nightmare of pullout from Iraq has occurred. Now the greatest jumping point to perform their long-term policy coup is ripped from their clutches. Paul Wolfowitz rambles on with his charge, making a stink of preventing another 9/11, while Cheney drums up whatever storm he can, but the fear is slowly dissipating. Rudy's a lost puppy in the mix, crying for his mommy. How will he deepen the wounds? Well, it's laughable that Laxa, Dick Cheney questioning me. But America needs anything most, it's for his voice to go away. If I'm on the wrong side of his sick political compass, I'm on the right side of history. On CNN, Cheney rambles about the dozen visible threats facing American foreign policy. When challenged by interviews, he retorts with all the hate in his heart as his voice echoes like thunder, cursing them out. Giuliani's campaign pulls him from any more campaign events. There we go. Let's do Texas. We have full command of NATO now. Congress bows before us. Russia's calm but suspicious. Oh no, this is where we're going to start making some serious gains in the polls. 36, 32, 39, 38. 38s, 36, and 32s. Keep all that in mind. To quell the wrath of Lehman Brothers' failure, you cast much of your political capital to the flames as a last-ditch effort, hoping to spare America from its collapse. As Secretary Summers feared saving Wall Street has enabled much of Congress to bury their heads in the sand. Now, without significant market persuasion, your calls for a bailout have fallen on deaf ears. However, the plot of his extravagant tale isn't entirely written until he dropped the pen. How will you venture through this impasse and write a happy ending? Well, returning of status quo is not on the table. Let's use send as Santa's message. Our economy is facing unprecedented failures, and there's only one class to blame. We're overhauling the banking system and punishing the people who knowingly hitched the taxpayers' dollars to empty shells. So we're doing tax hikes on the top 1% and the reestablishment of a combination of a Resolution Trust Corporation, a Reconstruction Finance Corporation, along with the reestablishment of the Homeowners Loan Corporation. A bill so radical it would be dead on arrival. Would be. Picture it like the 12 Knights of the Round Table. You tell the press, regaling the Economic War Council's input in the hefty bailout proposal that you presented to Congress. The press looks nearly dumbfounded as the congressional Republicans are, but their hollering becomes white noise. Your demands prevail as you tightly grip on your party's shoulders, reminding them who they owe their power to. There we are. The Emergency Economic and Banking Accountability Act, sponsored by Bernard Sanders of Vermont, establishes a Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP, whose funds would purchase toxic assets from the failing banks. The bill asserts tax hikes on the top 1% of over 2.5% annually, and the reestablishment of Resolution Trust Corporation, Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and Homeowners Loan Corporation. There we are. Let's take a look. 41, 37, 34, 41, 41. They don't seem impressive yet, but we're about to stack a ton. In a violent display of the Russian giant's hubris, Putin's trampled over Georgia's borders on the guise of Georgia committing genocide against South Ossetia, looking to revive the glory days of the Titanomachy of Soviets. You may have suspected Putin would commit forces to this, but you never expected him to act this fast. Now, Putin's knee-jerk response to the idea that NATO would accept Georgia as a member is turning into a media circus. He's called your bluff, looked across the table, and laid out his cards. What's in your hand, General Clark? Well, we have the big equalizer. What's going to really help us in the election? We're going to go to war. We need a willing coalition to save Georgia. This is more than a regional problem, it's a threat to world peace. Let's successfully possibly unite a front with the British and French to help Georgia take on the Russian menace. In your talk with NATO allies, we look at one another, utterly terrified of you and your mission. But not one of them dares to cross you now. For much strong arm and persuasion, they agree, and a coalition force is prepared to save Georgia. Let's do Oklahoma. Things are looking grim, Mr. Mayor. The Republican caucus is nearly in full revolt after hearing of your infidelity. The shallow credibility you had with the Republican base has dried up, and without it, your candidacy is up in the air. What's worse is that your loyal allies, all the sucking up to Bush-era folks, have begun to turn their heads, asking you to step aside for the sake of the party. How will you save yourselves? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's pull the brakes on whatever this is, alright? Negotiate this. Whatever they want, whatever the hell they want, get it on the table. A balanced budget or a ban on gays, whatever makes them happy. Maybe a cabinet position or two. Just make it happen. Establishment attempts to hold your candidacy hostage, but you make inroads with the crazies of the party. Huckabee, DeMint, and Brownback all shell out their support for you after you allow them to make you a puppet on strings for the worst elements of the party. I just noticed there's a website there. I should have checked to see if it was real. The facade is finally unraveling. Rudy's a clueless fool. A few things he can hold on to prop up his popularity are fading. He's too moderate for evangelicals, he's repulsive to liberals, and he's out of his depth with neocons. Rice was given this Herculean task to keep Giuliani's candidacy together. Rudy can't go on a minute without putting his foot in his mouth. Most importantly, all scandals loom over him like a storm. With news articles diving deep into alleged funds he used to visit a mistress, he's spiraling. You're near the final stretch, Wes. How should we capitalize on this? Well, the story of Giuliani's rise is fascinating, but I must ask, do you trust a man with this much personal baggage to take on a dictator? Do you believe a man who abuses city funds to go on extramarital affairs? These words ring very similar to the claims the Bush administration often spat out about you. It's working and maybe playing on the voters' feels, but it's paying off exceptionally well, as Rudy does whatever he can to extinguish the flames of the scandal by calling it a political hit job. It's all coming together. 10 points, 11, 9, 10, 11. Let's focus on Texas for now. Amid many establishment Republicans calling for Mayor Giuliani to drop off a ticket, stands one man, a blank face, unrecognizable in many, but a safe and normal Republican. Mike Pence is going in as the underdog, forced to defend Rudy's crumbling fortress. This debate may not mean anything to most voters, but as Gwen failed to read off rules, you know he can make a count Madden Vice President. How will he launch your attacks? Well, if Representative Pence is eager to debate economics, let's discuss Social Security. He thinks everything, including Social Security, needs to be considered when cutting spending. If he had his way, the rug would be pulled out from under our nation's most vulnerable. He's quick to backpedal on his prior statements, but he keep him on the issues. And eventually admits some reform must take place in the system. The Giuliani campaign quickly clarifies its position, but it's hurting the team. There we go. Also, cracks in the earth are forming after we've torched relations with Russia. Yeah, well. Yeah. Alright, so we're at 7 points. 7. 6. 7. I said it. 7. All lights are on you now, Wes. Here he is, America's mayor, standing across from you. There's no team to protect him now. No amount of debate preparation can stop his inevitable defeat. Rise can't shield him from the dangers of presidential debate. Reedy enters loud and proud, soaking it all up in a gladiatorial combat style. It's you and him now, and you're determined to destroy him. How will you ensure that Giuliani is wiped out? Well, no amount of fancy terminology can make Giuliani's outstandishly hawkish prose sounding better. He's backed by advisors like Condoleezza Rice, and his outlook on the world will be a repeat of the same immoral foreign policy of the Bush administration. Rudy puts it quite simply. 10 more combat brigades, 300 more naval ships, and 200,000 more men to throw in the Middle East. The proposals make the spectators nearly drop to the floor. People at home react in the same fashion, 9, 7, 8, 7, 8. We'll head to... drop another visit in Indiana. See if we can't salvage that. At last, overcoming the greatest trials and forging a better fate for all, you returned home scarred but triumphant. The Dow is rising, the markets are cooling, and the middle and low classes are under your protection. The world's leaders are ready to act in unison to combat this global crisis. The various New Deal era agencies you've resurrected work around the clock to hold the ship steady. You stand at the helm ready to confront whatever comes next. Secretary Larry Summers and his posse of analysts enter your office, unveiling the latest push for this session of Congress. While your political capital is not exhausted, you can throw one more dart at the board alongside this next stimulus package. What will it be, Captain Clark? So, out of all these, this is the one that boosts your popularity the most, so we're going to go for it. Minimum wage is the carrot that working class voters chase around, and the income inequality is a stick that we need to make it happen. Since we have the majority, let's shoot for a home run. Raise the federal minimum wage to $12 an hour. Democrats are forced to start carrying in duffel bags to carry their union donations after you announce a federal minimum wage increase. Republicans attempt trench warfare to slow the march of equality, but their efforts prove futile in the face of your unrelenting resolve. Now we're 5, 3, 3, 5, 5. So we might get Texas and Oklahoma from this. India, I'm not so sure. The Dakotas, I'm also not sure about. Valencia. The Russian 58th Army's armor march through the mountain passes that can credit all success to one strategic point: the Roki Tunnel, the blight of Georgia's resistance, the jugular of the Russian invasion. You know what needs to be done. The Air Force is waiting for your go-ahead to bury the Russians, and after that, NATO will pile into Georgia. It's time to vanquish your greatest foe and finish what you started back in Kosovo. Will you save Georgia? The United States can no longer play coy in the face of an apparent resurgence of Cold War attitudes. It's time for us to accept our national responsibility and destroy Putin's regime. Saving Georgia is our top priority. Before we do that, let's take a look at what we've done. We have the Workers Fighting Chance Act, sponsored by Ted Kennedy, established a gradual increase to $12 minimum wage from 2008 to 2012. Look at that. Ignoring loud opposition from Congress, claiming that you don't have a right to start a war like this, you can take full advantage of your predecessor's work in manufacturing a blank check to combat terror. And you have all the reason to call Russia a terrorist state. Soon you engulf the war in an unfathomable fire which shows no signs of burning itself out. Stick around to receive the concession call, or make one. So we have Clark, Giuliani, Tom Tancredo, and composer of the Curious George movie soundtrack, Jack Johnson, who's running with the Greens. So usually by now, Indiana would pop up for most. But nope. Kentucky, we've won by 10 points. Which is pretty huge. Vermont, we won, which isn't a shock. Georgia and South Carolina have come out in our favor. Virginia and West Virginia. Illinois. Pennsylvania. All of New England. We've got Tennessee. We've got North Carolina. We've got almost all of the original 13 colonies. Mississippi, we got. Giuliani finally got. And just like that, we've won 333. That's me. 3 so far. As much as you'd like to hear your opponent spill their soul over the phone, you have greater conquest to wage. The world will not kneel to the menace in the Far East. Georgia's fate is in your hands, as is much of the world. Yeah, we won all of the original 13 colonies. We've won Wisconsin. We've won Alabama. If we win Indiana, we've won every state west of the, or east of the Mississippi. We didn't win Oklahoma. That's unfortunate. Less than 2 points there, it looks like. We got Montana. We got Oregon. We got Washington. Didn't get the Dakotas. We depend on RNG for those anyway, so that's supposed to be the cherry on top. Shit, we lost Texas. Less than a point, though. Alaska will be coming in shortly. We got Alaska. It's all up to Indiana. We didn't get it. Yeah, it's kind of an RNG dependent run. I think I maximized the best you can do with it. RNG wise, it's just spreading yourself thin. You can almost get Indiana. You just need better RNG to get Indiana and Oklahoma and Texas, as well as not needing to visit the Dakotas to get anything. But you know what? That's still a pretty mighty margin of victory. I'll take it happily. It came at last. To the Elman he chased, the prophecy he hunted, the conquest Icarus long craved had manifested. To rule Olympus was merely a crown of circumstance, an emblem to drape over his armor. The real prize was to forge a legend everlasting. While lesser leaders would allow their power to wither and their name fade to memory, Icarus was resolved to transcend mortality. He would not vanish into the crowd. Satisfaction couldn't begin to describe how Icarus felt after dedicating his life to telling tales that lacked a proper audience, warnings of an existential threat that went unnoticed. Olympus abused its idle peace as an excuse to ignore evil beyond its borders. They laughed at him for so long, yet as darkness begins to creep over their walls, they cloak themselves in feigned foresight. He wasn't fooled. This was his vindication, his triumph. And so as he walked through the hollow halls of his decaying palace with each step echoing neglect, he prepared for what was to come. Petty concerns like starving subjects and crumbling streets were distractions to cast aside. Greater peril was found just outside his walls. Even the arrival of a so-called champion to contest his throne was a mere ritual, a fleeting distraction from the actual conquest lay ahead. Rivalry was wasted in the face of destiny. Opportunities to establish a legend like this were once in a lifetime. If fire was meant to consume the world for such a legacy to be written, then so be it. Before we go on to read the rest of these, first off, canon results, we decimated. Look at that. For the reading, I want to do results by state, excuse me. Closest states. About, 10,000 votes in Indiana. 80,000 in Texas, which is a pretty close margin for Texas. 25,000 in Oklahoma. South Dakota, 7,000. North Dakota, about 8,000. 7,000, 8,000. The bombing of the Rocky Tunnel was the United States Air Force strike carried out on October 7, 2008, during the Russo-Georgian War under the command of President Wesley Clark. Ordered with the intent of halting the Russian army's advance, the tunnel served as a key entry point and the only direct road link between Russia and Georgia. The bombing marked a significant escalation of tensions in Russo-American relations. The operation was conducted with the consent of Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili. The attack succeeded in temporarily disabling Russian forces invading Georgia, but drew widespread international criticism for the risk of turning the regional conflict into a global war. The bombing of the Rocky Tunnel was a U.S. Air Force strike conducted on August 9, 2008, during the Russo-Georgian War under the administration of U.S. President Wesley Clark, ordered with the intent of preventing Russian forces from advancing through the Rocky Tunnel, the only direct road link between Russia and Georgia's breakaway region of South Ossetia. The bombing marked a significant escalation in U.S. involvement in the conflict. The operation was carried out following a direct request from Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili and amidst urgent consultations in Washington led by Secretary of State John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Carl Levin. The strike succeeded in temporarily disabling the tunnel, but drew widespread international condemnation, with critics warning that it risked a direct war between the United States and Russia. The Rocky Tunnel, also called the Roski Tunnel. Hold on. Okay, Google, Wikipedia doesn't provide any audio translation. I'm just going to leave it there then. It's a mountain tunnel of the Transcom Road through the Greater Caucasus Mountains, the north of the village of Upper Roka. It's the only road joining North Ossetia and Alania in Russia to South Ossetia, a breakaway republic of Georgia. On August 7th, fighting broke out between Georgian forces and South Ossetian separatists. Russia responded by mobilizing forces and surging across the border. Despite several attempts in the following weeks, a ceasefire was tenable both for Georgian President Saakashvili and U.S. President Clark. On October 7th, following a failed attempt at ceasefire between Georgia and Russia, U.S. aircraft stationed aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt in the Black Sea launched surgical strikes on various civilian infrastructure, including the southern entrance of the Rocky Tunnel. Pentagon officials labeled it a defensive strike for the sole purpose of protecting the Georgian people. The strike caused the partial collapse of the tunnel and the effective halt of the Russian army's advance. Although no Russian soldiers were confirmed to be killed as a result of the strike, the Kremlin reported that over 25 soldiers were harmed. Reactions. U.S. President Clark delivered an Oval Office address defending the strikes. The United States will no longer stand for the Kremlin's attempts to redraw Europe's borders. The American people stand for freedom of our Georgian friends and will no longer tolerate Russian interference in their sovereignty. Russian President Dmitry Medvedev labeled the bombing as an act of war and placed Russian strategic forces on high alert. Russian state media described the U.S.'s actions as proof of American interference in their affairs and the Kremlin vowed retaliation. As a result of the bombing, Russia's ability to reinforce its position in South Ossetia was severely diminished for the weeks, allowing a window for American arms shipments to bolster Georgia's strength. Russian engineers reopened the tunnel weeks later and continued pressing deeper into Georgia. Diplomatic fallout was severe, with any chance of a timely ceasefire agreement being off the table. The strike prevented a larger Russian advance and caused a collapse of American relations between the U.S. and Russia. See also the Russo-Georgian War, Wesley Clark's presidency, U.S.-Russian relations, John Kerry, Carl Levin. Shared article. Royale denounces the Rocky Tunnel bombings, denouncing American leadership. Let's hear what Mike from Columbus, Ohio has to say. Oh, great. Looks like we should have let the French rot under Nazi rule since they're so comfortable siding with dictators. Zero. Leave it to France to utterly fuck up things. The usual surrender of our freedoms and hope for the best shtick is getting old. Jason R. As usual, the Democrats destroy our image in the eyes of the world by being an embarrassing joke. Honestly, Clark did bomb the Roki Tunnel. That's unbelievable. France is right to call him out. Why are we pretending this isn't reckless? Well, this just in. Royale reportedly went to the front lines of Georgia and hugged Russian tank operators who were scared by brief traffic disturbances. That wasn't a New York accent. I don't know what the fuck that was. Old diplomacy worked until President Clark came in, treating international politics like a game of battleships. Big words from a country that's always on the edge of war for itself, LOL. How dare one of the most educated countries in the world try to halt the breakout of a global war? This is Clark's crusade, not France's. Well, this is why I always said we need to fund NATO countries that refuse to stand by us in our hour of need. If the French won't have our back, we shouldn't have hers. Clark and the Russians are just puffing out their chests to look tough. Royale's a moral grandstander, only interested in doing what makes good TV. This stuff will go nowhere. Clark is running out of options and support to go to war. Does anyone else think Royale's kind of hot? Clark's war on the East is running on borrowed time. France is making much of this problem alludes to the end coming sooner than later. Secretary Kerry is already looking to bring this to an end. Well, let's see how Tony Blair came to be so unpopular. I mean, yeah. Is it a shock, really? If you went back in time to 1997 and told the average Brit that superstar icon who had swept them off their feet into the polls would be where he is now, they'd have a good laugh. Now, as we live history in the moment, there are cheers and laughs. Tony Blair has marched his party into an early grave due to his ego and hopes to regain his stolen valor from previous failings. Echoing shock and horror from the Blair campaign headquarters only served to further question where the Prime Minister believed he was taking his party. It's not like the polls ever favored his chances or his ability to claim victory. After Chancellor Brown's dramatic exit in late 2009, following the announcement of Blair's intention to run for another term, the Labour Party began to spiral out of stability and grace. When Blair triumphed over Major in a stunning rebuke of Thatcherism, the world clapped as near magic swept through the country. Welcomed by President Bill Clinton, their relationship grew strong with diplomatic ties that would further expand to George W. Bush. That is where the trouble began. When the September 11th attacks struck the heart of America, Blair stood by Bush as a showing of solidarity. He then followed Bush into both Afghanistan and, more controversially, Iraq, sinking Bush's credibility on the American promise that Saddam Hussein held nuclear capabilities. When the Bush administration came up short in providing evidence for such claims, so did Blair. From there on, controversy would stick to Blair like a magnet, and despite coming out of 2005 election victorious, the Labour Party was stung by the losses. The magic that captivated the media was rapidly dissipating, and rumors of a rift between Prime Minister Blair and Chancellor Brown circled the media. It was then Blair was offered a blessing. General Wesley Clark had stormed out of the American political scene, decapitating the Bush administration before it could cause him any more trouble. President Clark won the 2004 election on the promise that he would bring a change to the strategy in Iraq. This change would be a firm withdrawal deadline, offering Blair political room to work around Brown's threats of resigning and continuing his premiership. Working closely with President Clark, they handled Iraq and all of its controversy together. Withdrawing from Iraq would become Blair's championing policy, which apparently made him pursue an ambitious fourth term. Speculation that Blair would call the election in mid to late 2009 caught the Conservative Party flat-footed, and polls showed a possible Blair victory at the hands if the election were to be called. What Blair hadn't expected was the theory from Chancellor Gordon Brown, who expected him to step aside for the party's sake. Brown resigned, causing a total meltdown within the Labour Party, and effectively killing Blair's hope to call an election early, with Labour MPs loudly against it. So Blair had to watch the potential victory squandered by an unwilling Labour Party. David Cameron's Conservative Party would then rebound in the polls after the good feelings from the Iraq withdrawal faded and the economic woes returned. Blair shortly marched through the end of 2009 to 2010, deeply scarred by Bowden's exit, remaining determined to ride out the general election despite horrific polling across the provinces. He charged at the poll circumstances head-on, now promising a continuation of the economic recovery from the 2008 recession. Meanwhile, David Cameron effectively poised himself as a change leader, would end the chaos brought through the 2000s. As the past decade and the next came to clash, Cameron proved himself a winning bet as his party trounced over Blair's in a landslide, the final rebuke to the wrong-running Labour Party under the rule of Blair. The election marked itself as a performance report for Prime Minister Tony Blair, a report which would come very negative for him and his party. Tony Blair would then concede, ending Labour's dominance and allowing the Conservative vision to take the 2010s by storm. That's rough, buddy. I'm kind of running low on time. Yeah, I'll rush through this. Don't wait for the next war. Start it. The guideline to stopping Russian and Chinese aggression before they start it. By starting it ourselves, it seems. Well, there we go. When the Cold War... Damn. Can you fucking work, please? There we go. Anyway. When the Cold War came to the close, the world cheered, holding the same belief that those who won World War I held, thinking no stormy weather awaited. America's stand at another inflection point of time, poised to act with diplomacy, but the enemy we face isn't looking to talk. As a world superpower, America stands in the most envious position that our enemies are looking to match. For to win a second Cold War, we must face certain realities. War is sometimes the only substitute for a broad strategy. When our ironclad foes brush off international order and hit deep into neighboring democracies, they do so to challenge our global hegemony. Georgia was the first step towards a grand Eurasian vision for folks like Vladimir Putin possess. If America's not vigilant, all we've come to know in the 21st century will unravel. The strategy of attrition will not favor the enemy in the East, if they seek a return to the old East and Western blocs, they're repeating the sins of their fathers. So it's a true test of American leadership that I alone cannot solve. As president, hopefully my words and actions will be vindicated by you, my successors. Well, it looks like it was. Karl Rove, nearly catatonic as VP Mary Landrieu, defeats Chris Christie in stunning 2012 results. Alright, I'm running low on time, so I'm not going to be able to read this. I'm going to scroll slowly, so if y'all want to pause and read it on your own time, please do. In the meanwhile, I want to thank you all for watching this video. If you like, seriously like, if not, feel free to dislike. Leaving comments or feedback down in the comment section below. I read all comments I get, and I appreciate any all feedback you might have for me. Hit the sub button and notification bell to keep update with these uploads as they come out. Hit the like and subscribe button if you like these videos. Check out my various links down in the description box below. And yeah, check out the mod. It's a fun mod, probably one of my favorites in a long while. And I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks for watching, my friends. My name has been Mr. Dogbuff333, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye now.